On this episode of Rock Down South, we sit down with Disciple. This is an absolute monster of an episode, so you definitely don't want to miss this one. We hope you all enjoy. Let's go.
Hey, this is Kevin from the band Disciple,
And this is Andrew.
and you are listening to Rock Down South.
Welcome to another exciting episode of Rock Down South, your home for rock and country music. Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with lead singer Kevin Young and guitarist Andrew Stanton of the hard rock band Disciple. And this is an incredible episode that I think fans will really enjoy. We get into the band's long history, their sound, and of course, talk about the brand new album titled Skeleton Psalms, which you guys all should definitely go out and listen to. Kevin also tells us about a pretty funny story involving some pranks they had on tour years ago. This is one of our longer episodes, but it's definitely worth the listen. So without further ado, here's the show. Kevin, Andrew, how are you guys doing today?
Hey, what's up, Mark?
Fantastic, sir.
Yeah, doing awesome.
Excellent. Well, I'm super glad to have you guys on today. Really excited about this interview today. You guys have been one of those bands I've listened to for a while, so I think we'll have some fun with this one.
Thank you.
Sweet, dude.
Yeah. So kind of just to set the stage, kind of with my history with you guys, and I think I started listening to you guys back in high school, about 2005, I think.
Nice.
I think a self-titled album, and then the Scars Remain album that came out in 06. Man, I think I wore those things out back then. I was really liking those tunes.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.
I was before I was in this band.
Yeah, you're a little bit younger, right, Andrew?
Yeah, I was a fan at that era as well.
Yeah, it was a good era, and I think one of the things I liked about your sound back then, which really caught me, was really the heaviness of it with the catchiness and mega hard rock hooks and choruses. I really think was actually very, very ahead of its time when you think about it.
Well, thank you.
I don't know if you guys think about your music being ahead of its time back then, but I definitely think it was.
Well, I mean, no, I don't think that at all. I mean, we all have our influences and things that we gravitate towards, and I think that the makeup of the guys that were in the band that time, we would, write songs that were a mixture of everybody, which is the exact same thing that we do right now, which is why the new album, Skeleton Psalms, is really like a perfect representation of every member of the band. And self-titled and Scars Remain were that. It was just a lot of heavy, a lot of blues, a lot of screaming, but a ton of melody and singing and big choruses. And that just comes from, growing up, being the guitar player and the drummer. We all, grew up in the 80s and loved big choruses, and ended up really gravitating towards bands like Seven Dust, who would have these, and Stuck Mojo, all Georgia products there. They would,
I was about to say.
yeah. So, and we would watch those bands all the time, and they, had this heavy element, Seven Dust, and then these melodic big choruses, and we love that, and Bon Jovi was probably one of the biggest influences of mine growing up. And so when we were just gravitating towards a heavier sound, having big choruses was easy for me, because that's just kind of what I loved anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it was right up my alley, Bon Jovi, bands like that, was digging those in high school, and then got into your stuff. And there really wasn't a whole lot of kind of heavier music that still had that catchiness to it back then. I mean, when you look at the 2005 rock back then, it was like, bands are still very good today that actually have gotten heavier, your 3 Days Graces, your Seethers, but it was a little, it wasn't nearly as aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of see what you're saying now, especially in the Christian world. I mean, I'd say that it was a more of you had to make a choice. Which one were you going to be? And Andrew knows this really well. I refuse to make a choice. I just always want to mix in all the styles and elements, like we have a song called Radical, which basically has a praise and worship chorus as the bridge of the song. And it's almost like, there's a philosophy. Well, you can't do that in the middle of a rock song, but I'm always like, why not? So I just never wanted to pick one or the other. I just always try to mix them up. And I think that that's why you saw a lot of craziness in Disciple songs. There were, was always tempo changes and, you know, ballady choruses with these heavy, verses. And we just were not afraid to take risks and do things that maybe didn't make sense, but, sounded fun to us.
And the reason why I think you guys are such a awesome band from an early on stage like that, in my musical journey, is because I think your sound has largely been very consistent from, 2005 till now. Things have changed and whatnot, but, you still have that, really hard rock formula that I feel like you guys really nailed down early on right then. Other bands were doing it, doing the screaming and the singing as well, like Atreyu or, maybe Avenged Sevenfold or Bullet
Right.
from a Valentine. But I feel like you guys really kind of harnessed and honed that earlier on, and they kind of figured it out. I like their early stuff as well, don't get me wrong, but I feel like they kind of tailored their stuff a little bit more radio friendly later on.
Yeah, I would go back further. I would say 1999, the being heavily influenced on our album This Might Sting a Little by bands like Pantera and Stuck Mojo. I would say that's where we figured out who we were, and that the elements of melody were just leftover of who we were before that. Like
Mhm.
we were extremely a melodic, band stuck in the 90s, and the 90s had rejected, glam rock basically. And
Yeah, their first album was more akin to Alice in Chains, a little bit, and a little bit more Southern influence. The What Was I Thinking of '95,
yeah,
I
and
think.
and there was a couple of projects that we had before that you can find on YouTube, but we never released them. They were projects that we made while I was still in high school, and those were really like kind of 80s rock, 80s metal, and we very melodic, extremely melodic, no screaming. And then our first project that we actually claimed was called What Was I Thinking in 1995, and that was just a product of its time, like all these bands, Stone Temple Pilots, Alice in Chains,
Hmm.
Nirvana. There was, all of these influences, but we still, our guitar player was a huge Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, and he was learning how to play in drop D. So he's playing in drop D with basically like Stevie Ray Vaughan playing in drop D, it's just tons of blues, pentatonic, riffs and solos and all this kind of stuff. And so it was this band that just had all these influences that just kept coming out. It was like, it was Alice in Chains 1 minute, it was Stevie Ray Vaughan the next minute, it was Bon Jovi the next minute, it was this thing. And then, I'd say in that time frame, 95 to 99, there was a lot of Stuck Mojo, a lot of Pantera, influences happening, and we just got heavier.
Yeah, you guys definitely have that Pantera influence, and This Might Sting a Little, and By God as well. Those are definitely very heavily Pantera influenced. I really
Yeah.
like those albums.
Yeah. And so those three albums, This Might Sting a Little, By God, and Back Again, I think it's really when we kind of mixed all three of those, that's when we came up with who we are today, and like self-titled was extremely melodic. We just decided I didn't really want to scream that. We just try to write a really melodic album. And Scars Remain was like, okay, now let's write a heavy album again. And that's just kind of what we've been doing ever since, just kind of back and forth. And Skeleton Psalm is really just a step forward while reaching way back. There's a lot of songs that fans are saying that sounds like something off By God, or that sounds like something off of This Might Sting a Little, or that sounds like Scars Remain, or this, that. And I think that that's kind of what we were hoping to do, was write something new and fresh, but that also resonated with fans like yourself that fell in love with some older titles and kind of hear something that reminds them of that.
Yeah, yeah. And before we jump into the new album, because I definitely want to ask a lot about that. Scars Remain being one of those pivotal albums that I listen to, you always kind of remember those albums you listen to like your senior year of high school, they kind of just stick with you. But
Yes,
that
they
was
do.
one.
Yes, they do. I don't. What is it about that senior year? It's where you find they're driving to school, and I don't know. Just all the music from that year just is forever tattooed on your soul.
Yeah, yeah. So that album, 2006, I think I even saw you guys on tour with maybe Family Force 5. at some
Yeah,
church
you did.
somewhere.
You did.
It might be the only time I've seen you guys live. I don't know, but
Might have been '06 or '07, but yeah, you did.
yeah. And then so that album was awesome. I still think you guys could probably have singles off of that album, put them out today, and they would be good on the radio. That's
Thank you.
how long ago that album was, but still very, very relevant, I would say, with the sound. And then kind of circling back around to that album, a total departure. Well, not a departure if you've listened to you guys do have ballads, but After the World was a huge hit on Christian radio at the time, if I remember, which was, I think, quite interesting. My musical choices of that, and then also turning on the Fish with my family and hearing that song play.
Yeah, again, I mean, that was always who we were. I think that there was only one album that we had, which this might sting a little, that didn't have like a slow song ballad on it. I mean, What Was I Thinking had one, My Daddy Quit Your Daddy had one, By God definitely had one, Back Again had one, self-titled, plenty of them, and Scars Remain had two. And so that was just something that we did. We were never getting any airplay or radio play for it. So, people say, oh, well, of course you did that for radio. That wasn't true for us. Radio was not touching us ever. And, but finally they did. And we even were told by our record label, because we wrote the song After the World from kind of like God's perspective. It's like God is singing the song to you. That we were told, like, you can't write a song, from God's perspective. Radio won't play it. And my response to him was like, radio won't play it. Radio doesn't play us anyway. Like, what are you talking about? And then, they did. It was insane. So, yeah, it was our first number one Christian single on CHR radio. And yeah, it was a really special moment.
It was funny because I'd listened to that. I was like, this is an awesome song and it fits well in here. I was like, but do you guys know who you're playing? Why don't you play another song off the album? Let's see what the audience says.
Honestly, man, that's exactly what program directors of radio stations would say as to their hesitation to playing us sometimes. They said, we love this song. We think the song is great, but we won't play it because if our listeners go and buy this album, we know what track 2 sounds like. And so we're not going to do that to our listeners. And I was like, oh, okay. So that's kind of the fight we were always up against. You put up a good song, and still Christian radio sometimes wouldn't play it because of how heavy we were with our other songs.
That's funny. So you guys are from Knoxville. You're from Knoxville, Kevin, and the band was originally from there. Yeah. Where are you guys based out of now?
Well, Andrew, tell you where he's from.
Yeah, I'm from California, from San Jose. I moved to Nashville. It's going to be 10 years ago when I started touring with Disciples. So I'm sort of a transplant. I'm sort of one of those Nashville guys that is from the West Coast that's causing everything to be more crowded and expensive.
Oh, you did it. You did it way before the mass migration. You did it,
yeah.
You did it 10 years ago.
Been in the band for a while, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. He's a Tennessean now. He's been there for like 3 presidential cycles. He's a Tennessean.
He was there before it was super cool and trendy.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Yeah, I watch balls now, so I'm in.
Our bus lives in Nashville as well, and I'm originally from Knoxville, but I married a Kentucky girl about 17 years ago, so I live in Kentucky now.
Kentucky. There we go.
Yeah.
So Andrew, what's this ride been like with you for the last 10 years with the Disciple and jumping into a band that you knew of or were a fan of at one point?
Yeah, it has been a ride for real. Like I was alluding to, I was a fan before. I loved Pillar in high school. I also graduated in 2006, so I think we're probably the same age.
07 for me, but I was one of those August babies that was held back, so you and I are probably the same age.
Yeah, I was born in March, so real close. And yeah, basically Christian rock was my life as a teenager. That's what I wanted to do. I worked around that time I worked at the Christian bookstore in the music section. So I was, putting Disciple and Pillar and 1,000-Foot Crutch and Skillet, all those CDs on the shelves. And so I started a band with my buddies early in high school, and we sort of evolved into a sound around that time, like, end of high school, college. that was like, that hard rock, post-hardcore, metalcore sort of thing. We were big Killswitch Engage fans too, so we had all those influences sort of swirling. So that band was called I'm Empire. We toured and ended up doing a couple albums with Tooth and Nail, and so that led me to meeting bands like Disciple at festivals, and so that was kind of the thing that took me from being a fan to being a participant, in this whole thing. But joining Disciple was insane because when I'm Empire sort of was like winding down, stopping touring and all that stuff, everybody was getting married and sort of moving on. I still wanted to be on the road and play and make records, and so I was in Germany, met all the Disciple guys sort of officially. We sort of, said hi, and I'd known a couple of them. Been to Micah's house in Nashville for a barbecue, stuff like that. But that was like officially meeting everyone and becoming friends, and that was our first exchange of like.
He literally met all of Disciple, because that particular night that we were all in Germany, the lineup from Disciple 1.0, which is the original lineup, and then the new lineup, Disciple 2.0, all the new guys were all there too. So like Disciple 1.0 played on Friday night, and Disciple 2.0 played on Saturday night in Germany, and Andrew's band was there too. So he literally met everybody that had ever been in the band.
Wow.
That weekend. Yeah.
Yeah. So, that was, up until that point, was its own ride, but the last decade has been insane because, guys like Kevin and all the people that we are peers with now, like Lester from Pillar is the guy that we used to track drums with. And these are the people that were on my wall on posters and album covers and stuff when I was in high school and growing up. So it's still crazy to realize that all those things that I sort of thought about and dreamt about as a young person, like, materialized. I always feel extremely fortunate and blessed and all those things. I'm sitting in my home studio right now in Nashville, and I get to work on projects with artists and do stuff for myself, make instrumental stuff. I get to work on our records now. We self-produced this newest record. Josiah did the bulk of the work there, but I did all the guitar engineering and reamping and stuff here in this room. And it's just insane to think about it. It all sort of becomes a part of the daily routine, but it's never like lost on me. It's always exciting thing to wake up and be like, oh, I get to do that today. I get to like play guitar or make a video or work on a record. And it'd be way too tough to explain in a couple of words. Like, there's no term for it, but it is a ride.
That's incredible, man. And Kevin, what has Andrew brought to the table that's maybe been new or different that he added to the band?
Well, he's just pure rock and roll. So like, having him is basically like allowing the band to keep that rock and roll. I tell him that all the time. You'll know what song he wrote. You'll know what riffs he wrote. And those are the kind of songs that I like. And I love the way that we write songs right now, because Andrew just kind of has that kindred spirit with me. So anytime I'm ever writing, a rock song, with little riffs, like we wrote a song on Love Letter Kill Shot. I don't know if you're familiar with that album or not, but it was like a heavier song, had these little riffs. So, I mean, I knew I would just take it to Andrew and say, hey, here's a little riff I wrote, and just handed it to him. And he basically just like, we just kind of like united our spirits, and he was like, here's this riff, and he just takes it and finishes it, so he's just been a huge blessing to have.
Yeah, even though I'm younger than Kev, I grew up with those bands that I mentioned, but I also discovered 80s rock and 80s metal in high school, and that was the biggest influence on me as a musician. My favorite band's Van Halen, so listening to all that stuff, the Bon Jovis, the Guns N' Roses, Scorpions, Dokken, all those bands, kind of like 20 years after it was cool.
Yep, that was me too.
Yeah, it was an interesting process while it was happening, it was just like, this is just me. I'm the only kid at school with this stuff on my binder. But meeting all the musicians that I've met, and guys like yourself, Mark, it's like, oh yeah, here's all the other people that like that stuff. And so we get to work together, and they all know, oh yeah, Dream Theater's second album, so awesome.
No, it was an interesting time in high school. And like you said, I gravitated towards the 80s rock as well because it was fun. It was like, it was party music. It was feel good music, huge choruses, and it was heavy and fun. And I think around that time when we were in high school, 04, 05, 06, 07, I mean, the rock was there. We had rock on the radio, even on popular radio, but still some of that 90s, depressingness that kind of lingered, you know what I mean? They weren't doing these big, fun, catchy songs, except for in, pop radio, which was, kind of yucky sometimes.
Sure.
It was a weird time, man. It was so weird. Just
Well, it was
honestly.
anti-guitar solos too. Like,
Yeah,
the only bands I liked as a junior higher, there was like, oh, there's a band with guitar.
Yeah, there was this weird ambivalence or just rejection towards anything that was polished, or like American Idol could have never existed in the 90s, because if you could sing, your band was not going to make it. Like if you I mean, there are some good singers from the 90s, Soundgarden, for example.
Yeah.
But you're not going to find many. I mean, you're just not, of all the major awesome bands in the 90s, because it was just this rejection of like, we've seen all this excess of all these guys just singing their butts off, and all these guitar players, playing their butts off and just doing all these incredible things, and they're just tired of it. So it was almost like this counterculture, alternative, like hard left turn, we're going to do this thing that just sounds different than anything else. And if you did it well, you're out. So that was just weird. It was very strange. But it was fun too, and it almost needed to happen. But I do hate that it wrecked all these bands that,
well, as a guitar
player, it wrecked
as,
them all.
Yeah, it totally did. And as a guitar player who started playing in 1999, when I started learning, it's like beginner stuff. And then like the first things I was learning for fun were like the Supertones and Blink-182 and Sum 41, like all the pop punk stuff had the cool, fun guitar. So like the 80s spirit sort of lived on in that, but it wasn't technical. Like it wasn't good as far as like, advancing musicianship or whatever. So that was the first thing. But yeah, it was very like Kevin was saying, like the polished, like excellence was sort of, kept out of popular music and stuff. But then as a guitar player, whenever Guitar Hero came along on Xbox and PlayStation, that became a way to like talk to people about guitar and retro bands, because they had, Kansas or Leonard Skinner or Black Sabbath on the video game, and it got really popular. Like when we were, hanging out at our buddies' houses, that was like the number one go-to thing to do. And that sort of opened up all this attention on guitar. And then YouTube came along, and guys started posting videos and discovering other, like, guys like Guthrie Govan and like Jason Richardson, like the super shredder internet star guitar player, was born around that time. And so it's sort of come back in that way, but it's like a counterculture thing.
Yeah, and I just thought about this question just now. I didn't even have it prepared, but I have to give a lot of props to Kevin, in the 90s, putting out music that was faith-based, because it was not the cool thing to do.
No, not at all.
A lot of those, what's your generation? It's not, I'm millennials. We're millennials. Was it Gen X?
Gen X, yeah.
Gen X, thing about Gen X is they were very much a departure from the generation before. So it was very, very in style and vogue to like be anti-Christian. Everything was like establishment, anti-Christian at that time in order to be cool. And of course it's different now. Now you guys are like the rebels, you know what I mean? Which is cool.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a cool full circle. But back then it was like not considered cool.
We definitely were not cool because, we grew up listening to bands like Petra and White Cross, who they were just extremely upfront vocal about their faith. Their songs were very vertical. You know, they were not ashamed to mention Jesus, not ashamed to, you know, basically write songs that might as well just be Bible verses, you know, just thrown into the lyrics. And that was the kind of stuff that I really loved growing up. It had a huge impact on me, but even more so, I'd go to these concerts and they would be very bold about their faith from the stage, and they would encourage people. And it was very evangelistic. They would, you know, literally talk about Jesus from the stage in a way to compel people to become Christians. And I was like, this is insane, you know. And you just look around the audience and, you know, not judging everybody, but you just be like, this doesn't look like church. These folks don't look, these people don't go to church, you know. And they're boldly just talking to these kids about Jesus. I thought this was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And so there was this element of boldness and courage that you know went with these bands that I really admired. And so in the 90s, especially, we got signed to Warner Brothers Records in 97. And so there was this thing where, you know, you could be a Christian, but try to figure out a cool way to say it. You know, you don't have to say Jesus, you know, just figure out an artistic way to say it. I really like pushed back against that. I was like, I want to say whatever I want to say. And if I want to do it, if I want to write a song that way, that's fine. But I don't want to write a song that way because you're telling me that's just the way that music is right now. And I was a little naive, a little young, you know, a little just, you know, wanting to do it my way and not really wanting to let people tell me what to do. And I think that served us well at the time, because there wasn't very many bands that were openly vertical talking about Jesus in that way in the 90s.
That's the rock and roll mindset, though.
It really was. It was just kind of like, you know, there's nobody, you know, when I say nobody, that is obviously an exaggeration, but there were very few people that were being evangelistic with their faith from the stage and things like that. The things that I saw in the 80s and early 90s, no, that had all went away. All the Christian bands that were all my friends who I love dearly and think very highly of, that was just not their thing, and that's not what they were trying to do. And you know, of course, so there was this temptation to try to mold ourselves into becoming like them. And I just resisted it. I was just like, no, this is not why I got into music. This is not what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be, you know, evangelistic like my heroes. I wanted to see people come to Christ and kind of just like start a movement, you know, not really about my band, but, you know, a movement of people reaching, a band reaching people that didn't come to church through music, you know, and that's what made an impact on my life. And so having experienced that myself, that's what I knew. You know, you kind of can only talk about what's real to you and what you really know. And that was what was real to me and what I really knew. So I didn't know how to write these clever songs about Jesus and be all artistic about it. That just wasn't me. I didn't know that. And so I think that there was this authenticity and genuineness that I brought to the table that it served us well, you know. Like I just all those other guys that were doing the other thing, they were being authentic in their way, and it served them well. And I think that's just the way it was supposed to be.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, you guys know this, authenticity sells at the end of the day. It doesn't matter what it is, you know what I mean? So even when I was listening to you guys, you know, back when I was early, I really didn't even classify you in my head as like Christian artist. Now, definitely I like to listen to the music to become inspired, you know, from that perspective, but I just looked at it as music at the end of the day, you know. Music is, right, you know, inspired by the artists, and if, you know, they're singing about something and they truly believe it, you know, that resonates, whether it's, you know, Rage Against the Machine, you know, singing about I won't do what you tell me, or you guys, you know, it's sold really well and you feel it. And so I think that's, for me, what music has been something that I really like to feel and listen to, because I'm more of a melody guy, but I really have been digging your lyrics, even more so lately, been digging them a little bit more as I become a little bit more into lyrics. And, you know, I'm really impressed with your lyrics, you know, looking back at some lyrics that you've written, really unashamedly writing what you want. And where does that come from? Of course, you have, songs that are, not lyrically as deep, that are more fun, but you definitely have a lot of deep lyrical songs. And where does that kind of come from as a writer?
Um, I appreciate that compliment. First of all, thank you so much. I think one of my biggest strengths in writing is kind of like what I'm going through. I've not had a traditional life, and have made uh plenty of mistakes, and not just um minor incursions. I've done some insanely reckless and careless things in my life, and have paid the consequences of those things, and had also been through some things that were not my fault, and kind of writing about those things is very therapeutic. And it come to find out, I am not unique to the human experience. And when you write about things that are real to you, that are authentic, there are tons of people that have gone through the same thing, or really, experiencing the same thing. And then, will come up and say, I feel like you wrote this song just for me. When in reality, I wasn't writing it just for them. I was kind of writing about my experience, but that's what resonates, is when it's something real. And I've never tried to be something I wasn't. I've tried to be honest, and tried to just kind of really just lay it out there artistically, and not really tell people to follow Jesus because I think it's a good idea, but also just to kind of write about the struggle of the human experience, and my absolute desperate need for God on a daily basis, as opposed to just saying, this is, the directions that you need to go. Now enjoy yourself, go that way. It's like, yeah, I tell the guys all the time, I want to be a band that is kind of a soundtrack for people's lives, no matter where they are in life, whether they are experiencing the high of being born again, and just the high of coming out of addiction and being free from addiction for the first time, or the loneliness of being just lost in addiction, and the desperation of just wanting to be free, or going through the loss of a loved one, whatever it may be, wherever you are, we want to have a song for them and be the soundtrack of their life. And I think that that's kind of what helps me write, is just to write about what I'm going through.
Yeah, you guys definitely have had some songs that helped me out during tough times. You're probably one of the few bands that I mean, there's a handful of bands that I'll listen to during tough times, but some of those ones that I remember, being a teenager, or being in my early 20s. I think some of those songs were Dear X, You Don't Own Me was a really, really powerful one for me. Once and For All from Oh God Save Us All album. And then, of course, Someday as well. I think those are probably my top three ones that really got me through some tough times. I don't know about you, Andrew.
That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, I remember, when I was a fan in that era, learning. I was like playing in drop C tuning for the first time in my bedroom on my Epiphone guitar, and I was like, "Wow, my strings are gonna come off; they're so loose." But I'd read in a magazine, I think, that Noah from Pillar used that tuning, uh, making a record with this guy named Travis Wyrick, and I was like, "Wow, these are the coolest people ever that I'm reading about." And so I was tuned up like that, and I remember my buddy had let me borrow Back Again, or had burned it for me. Maybe I owe Kevin $10 for it still. But
You're fine.
I had that, and Touch came on, and so I learned that, da 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 da, that riff, and was just having fun with that a few years after that album came out. But I remember thinking like, wow, this is like such a fun, exciting song, and it's just like, really Jesus forward. Like he's just saying that over and over, and it felt pure. I'd already experienced like the Amy Grants and the Michael W. Smiths of the world as a younger kid growing up with parents that listened to that, and I loved that during that age. But yeah, in high school I was like into Pillar and Blindside and the more artistic sort of approach lyrics that Kevin was talking about, which are awesome. But it was very like stark and sort of stood alone in my memory. So that would probably be the song that comes to mind first, as far as like that made me feel like, proud about my faith and everything in that scope of music to hear that song at that time.
That's really the thing that I missed on answering your question too, was that what Andrew was just saying there was, there was this missing energy for being excited about your faith, in music. And there wasn't those, when the song Jesus Freak by DC Talk, came out, there was this, like, this is who I am. And if you don't like it, fine, like, almost like Christianity just had to be nice and love everybody and whatever. And it was like, no, we do love everybody, but I'm not here to let you change me, and I think that that was kind of the songs that we were really excited about, is like, hey, this is who we are. This is when people are excited about Jesus, we're going to write songs that for these people. Now, not everyone is going to like those songs. And that's when we figured out we're a band that's not for everybody. And we were like embracing it. We're like, we're not for everybody. We're not commercial. We're not, Christians don't like us, and mainstream doesn't like us. We're not for everybody. We're for these people who are like, who literally want somebody screaming at them with these heavy guitars and just saying, like, man, I actually, love Jesus, what he's done in my life. And like, I'm excited about following him. I'm excited about worshiping him. I'm excited about, giving my life, to him. And these kind of songs, inspire me to go deeper with him. So that was kind of the energy of it. Again, it's kind of being authentic. It's like, that's really who we were. I mean, the guys know this story. I mean, in the early days of Disciple, we would show up, the three of us, and we would put on a praise worship CD. And our thing was we would worship, to these praise and worship CDs like 30 minutes before we would pick up our instruments. And that was kind of our thing. And so it was a real thing for us. We were like really, really excited about our faith in Jesus. And so when we were writing about it, we weren't like talking about something that was weird or contrived. It was like very real to us to be, that excited about following Jesus.
Yeah, you guys have a lot of fantastic songs that are like that. I love those balls to the wall songs that are about being excited about your faith and things like that. Long Live the Rebels comes to mind. I mean, there's just so many that are really, really fun like that. And that's one of the reasons why I like you guys as well, because you have those songs like that, but you also have, like I mentioned, some of those more sensitive songs, which kind of shows a nice dynamic, which I always like in bands.
Yeah, we had a good balance on the new record of those things, and it was cool to achieve that. But yeah, I'm with you. I like the fun ones.
Yes, and so this brings me, of course, to the new record. Probably the longest I've gotten into a new record promo for any interview since we've been chatting it up. Usually I try to do it in the first few minutes, but let's talk about the brand new album, Skeleton Psalms. Another awesome album with a lot of great tunes, and even some newer kind of sounds in there as well. But tell me about this album and making it. I know it's been a few years since you put out the last one.
Yeah, well, man, it took a long time to get this album out. The last album came out in 2019. Then we had a deluxe. It's called Love Letter Kill Shot. And then we had a deluxe come out, Love Letter Kill Shot Deluxe, in 2020. But obviously with COVID and all of that, it really put us behind, to be honest with you. And then we got the opportunity to play Winter Jam in the spring, which was when we were planning on finishing the record. And we were like, well, we're going to be on tour all spring, so now we have to hurry up and finish it now. So we literally just started scrambling in the months of November and December of 2022 to finish this record. And I think it served us well to scramble, because we, the thing that we were really having trouble with was we're kind of perfectionists, and we'll just keep pushing, we'll keep working on something. And at some point you just have to stop working on it and, just release it. And it was really good for us to just put a deadline on it, because it just helped us get it done. And one of the beautiful things about this album is it's the first Disciple album with only 10 songs on it. So we always have these other songs that we end up liking, but it forced us to pick the best 10 songs we have. And that in turn, I look at this album very fondly and say it's probably the most complete album we've ever put out, as far as the quality of songs from start to finish. Every album has, like, what I would consider some good songs on it, but then there are some later songs that might not be so good. And this album doesn't suffer from that in any way. It's just, in my opinion, I'm very proud of, what we did. And that's really just a testament to the band members and all the writers in the band, because we wrote 30 something songs. So not all of them were, all that, but we picked what we thought were the 10 best ones. And, and that seems to really work.
Yeah, it's a really strong album. I mean, I think all your albums are very strong and listenable from start to finish. This one definitely was. I really enjoyed listening to this one from start to finish several times. So excellent job on this one. I think it's a fantastic album with some things that were a little bit different. I don't know if I necessarily remember you guys being a guitar solo band, but I definitely heard some solos in this one. I think in Bad Words, and then Dawning of Deliverance has that really super long solo, which I like.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Andrew is the main guitar solo influence there, and we've been doing it a lot. I'd say Love Letter Kill Shot had an insanely long guitar solo with Wake Up. We had a song called Wake Up, and I remember he was done playing the guitar solo, and I was like, why don't we just do it twice as long? And so we just ended up, playing it, twice as long. And I think it doesn't every song on this album have a guitar solo, Andrew, or almost every one.
Yeah, it's up there. I think it's probably like 7 out of 10 songs. So yeah, I'm really lucky because not every guitar player gets to get away with that. But writing and making demos for songs at home, I'll always throw solos in to make them feel kind of like complete to me. Like that's a big part of what I like. So it doesn't feel like the song's done until that's in there somewhere.
Yeah, he's got a huge advocate with me as a singer, because I'm a huge fan of guitar and a really big fan of guitar solos. And so, he knows that I'm never gonna tell him no. When he throws a solo in there, I'm never gonna say like whatever. But we do talk about, like he'll do what he likes, and then we do talk about what I like. I'll be like, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And so, we do definitely collaborate on the solos. It's 95% him, but I'll throw my 5% in there and get, my fingerprints on and ask him to do something that I like, out of selfish reasons, of course.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of positive reinforcement for playing solos and leads throughout things, and so it's always fun for me because and Josiah is a great guitar player as well, and he'll get focused more on producing and songwriting because those are his like main functions, I think, as a musician. But when we have a part of the song that's dedicated to that, he's got a lot of good input and he'll play a lot as well. On Dawning of Deliverance, we had Marco Pera, who plays bass for us at a lot of shows. He fills in for me on guitar pretty often at shows. We had him play half of the solo. So it's kind of like this Guitar Hero back and forth battle.
Showdown. In Dawning of Deliverance. But also, Andrew's been in the band for about 10 years. So has Josiah, also been in the band for about 10 years. And Josiah wasn't really much of a guitar soloist when he joined the band. And now he actually has solos on, this album. And he had, some on the last album too. And so I think he's shown a lot of growth, guitar playing wise, which has been phenomenal because he's a completely different style of player than Andrew is. And so I love that because it helps us widen our net of musical styles, when you have, people who can do different things, which is also why I love letting other people sing, because their voice just sounds different than mine. So you'll always, on every album recently anyway, you'll always hear me and probably somebody else at some point. It's just because it's just a new flavor and it's a new thing. And so there's different guitars playing, different guitar sounds, different vocals. It's all kinds of things happening.
Yeah, speaking of different vocals, Bad Words, which is probably one of the heavier songs I've heard you guys make in a while.
Yeah,
That one had
for
guest
sure.
vocals on it as well.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, Marco was there. So Marco might as well be a member of the band. He's the lead singer of a band called Amongst the Giants, and he's played a ton of shows with us as our bass player, and is obviously a phenomenal singer because he's the singer of his own band. And he's doing a lot of the screaming on that album. But there is another voice that you hear on the pre-chorus, which is Josiah, that kind of keep your head down, better not speak out. And he's been singing on the albums for a while. I mean, he had some parts in the last album on a song called Panic Room. And Andrew could probably tell you more of when he sang, but he's becoming more frequent singing, you know. So usually when he writes a song, he'll demo out his vocals, and what will happen is I just become attached to the way that he sings things because I'm obviously very Southern, and I pronounce things differently than him and sing things completely different than him. He has the more of this pop punk Blink 182 way of singing and pronouncing his words. And so it's just extremely different than me. And I'll become very attached to his vocal performance. And so, you know, I'll re-sing a lot of things that he writes and then would be like, no, I love the way that you did that. So let's keep that because I could never do it that way. So he's been having a lot of vocal performances on the albums in recent years for sure.
Yeah, he's such a prolific writer. You know, he's getting all these ideas together, like Kevin's saying, and so all the first drafts of those songs have his voice throughout the whole thing. And so we keep a pre-chorus or keep a section, but yeah, it's really a lot of times the first draft of lyrics and melodies had his voice on it as well, and his guitar playing. You know, so that it becomes like, all right, which parts are we gonna replace or change, and then which parts are we going to keep. So it's pretty cool because for the rest of us, we have a lot less like creating from scratch than a lot of bands do. We get to do a lot of the collaborative creating.
So speaking of writing albums, I think there was probably about 5 years in my 20s, maybe early mid to late 20s. I can't remember, but there was about 5 years that I really didn't keep up with you guys, unfortunately. And then when I got back into you, there was like 3 albums worth of stuff, or maybe 4 albums worth of stuff that I had to go back and listen to.
That's the thing. If you leave us for a while, we're gonna have plenty waiting for you when you come back.
You guys are putting out albums, was it like every other year? It's very impressive. How'd you guys do that?
Well, in the 30 years we've been together, I think we're averaging like an album every 2 years. Is kind of what comes out to being, I think.
Yeah, we also had a worship album come out under the project name
Honor and Glory.
Yes.
in 2022, but it was really made during 2020 and was kind of finished in 2021. Got released, got delayed. I can't remember. Something happened. It was like worldwide. I don't know. But supply chain issues ensued, and it ended up coming out a little later. But Josiah produced that as well. So basically, him and Kevin made that album, and it's not a disciple album, but it's also in my mind like part of the timeline.
Yeah, it is.
Factor that
Yeah,
in
it's
too.
definitely.
More impressive.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is one of the reasons that I left out of why it took 3 years in between albums because we did that worship
Yeah.
album for sure.
How do you guys just sit down and write so many good songs? Not to stroke your ego or anything, but I do think a lot of your songs, your majority of your albums are very, very good. Like, how do you put out so many good songs without like a team of folks? You know what I mean? Of 30 people.
Well, we really trust each other. This group has been together for about 10 years, and we're best friends, and so that really helps out. And so, like, if somebody says, hey, I don't really like that song, we don't get offended by that because we write so many songs, so it's not like the end of the world that somebody doesn't like one of the songs that you wrote. So if somebody writes a song and it's just like, yeah, I'm not really feeling that, this, it might be a little bit of a bummer in the moment, but the next one everybody's going to love. So it's one of those things where that freedom allows us to say, when we all like it, we like it. And that gives the song a really good chance, because if the band likes it, then there's a good chance that if you've been a fan of the band, that our tastes are going to align. If the band likes a song, then the fans of the band will probably like it. And so, if Andrew doesn't like something, or Joey doesn't like something, or Josiah doesn't like something, or I don't like something, the chances of it making the record are very slim. But what ends up happening instead is that we'll just change the thing that we don't like. We'll figure out, okay, well, what's the thing about the song that we do like? And we'll keep that. For example, the song Executioner, which is track 1 off of Skeleton Psalms. So if you listen to The Executioner, the verses were written in 2015, and the verses were written with a chorus that we didn't like. So it never made Long Live the Rebels. It never made Love Little Kill Shot, because it existed with a chorus we didn't like. Well, I wrote a chorus that I did like in 2022, and was like, oh, I love this chorus. What kind of verses should I write? And I was thinking about what to write. And I was like, oh, they already exist. They're on that song that we wrote back in 2015. Actually, these verses actually fit the same theme and everything with this chorus. And so we took something that we liked from way back when, but we didn't have a chorus that we liked, finally figured out a good chorus that we liked and put it together. And the guys finished the rest of the song. I think Andrew and whoever ended up writing a bridge, and Josiah ended up, writing these bridge melodies. So everybody got their fingerprints on the song, and it's the best song on the record, in my opinion. Not necessarily my favorite, but for sure the best song, in my opinion.
It's a good song. I like that one.
But that's kind of the thing, is that, just because something's on there, that's good, it wasn't all good. And we're really concerned about that. We're like, the whole thing has to be good, or we're not going to do it. If there's a section we don't like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to be like, I don't like that, and then everybody gets involved and says, oh, well, what don't you like about it? I'm like, I don't really like this or that. And then you're like, well, what about this? And then, or Andrew will be like, well, what about this? Or Josiah, what about this? And we just have a really good sense of doing that, with each other. And, in other band dynamics, because I've been in 3 versions of Disciple, that kind of conversation would never happen. That kind of conversation would probably hurt somebody's feelings, and a band members be fighting, punching each other, and somebody die at the end of the day, but we don't have that. We're like really, really respect each other and really admire each other and are big fans of each other. And so when somebody says, I don't like it, instead of getting offended, they're like, well, what can we do to make it better? And so it really is awesome as far as songwriting is concerned.
Yeah, we've got a good culture of, helping each other grow and try new things. And yeah, there's never like a moment, even if you're bummed out, like, oh, that idea didn't go over as well as I thought it would or something. It's like, well, it's probably going to be better. That's probably why, like, we've been reinforced enough times to know that it's always heading in a good direction. So yeah, like he said, we're pretty fortunate because not every band has that.
That's quite interesting. It's something I've always been impressed with you guys, like the amount of stuff that you guys put out that's quality. I mean, you live in Music City, Andrew. I mean, the only people that are putting out music albums every other year that are decent, well, arguably, are country artists, because they got teams of folks that are writing this stuff and giving them the best stuff to choose from,
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of co-writing, and yeah, I do that with other artists and bands that I do production for as well. Do guitar features or do some tracking work, whatever.
Well, Mark, I would say we're no different, because we're like a team of people doing it.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, when I do it with those artists, it's because we're working on a project together, so I'm just a part of that band or whatever for that moment, or during those hours. And so we just bring that same approach to Disciple. Or really, it's like the other way around. I learned how to do that with Disciple, with all the producers, getting to do records with Travis Wyrick and Aaron Sprinkle and guys that made stuff I listened to all growing up. That really taught me, being in this band has taught me so much about how to work in music and live in Nashville and all of that.
I guess where I was coming from is like, you guys are only 4 or 5 people putting this thing together. Whereas, I guess maybe akin to country music, when they're putting stuff out every other year, you got 10, 15 writers on something,
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. Like, some bands, will only have usually like 1 or 2 guys writing. And, it really is like the 4 of us writing together. And as talented as somebody may think or assume that I am, the other guys, Andrew and Josiah and Joey, are like 50 times more talented than I am. So, I've had this vision of the band, since day one, and I kind of know what I want to accomplish. And then have just been given this massive gift of blessing of these guys that are extremely talented. I mean, if you could just hear the songs that didn't make the record, they're like still really, really good. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of like, I can't take credit for that. It's just these guys, writing. There's so many songs that get written, and I'm not the one writing them. It's just having guys in your band that are like really, really talented. So it is kind of like this team of talented songwriters, like country, has a team of folks, and a management like farming, all these songs, but we hit the jackpot with all these awesome songwriters in our band, so it kind of works out.
So I chatted with an artist recently that you actually know, Ryan Hahn of Ryan Hahn and the Believers, and I think he said he toured with you back in the day, back in 2004. But he told me to ask you about some of the pranks that you guys may have pulled or funny stories that come to mind.
We talk about this all the time. Their pranks on us were legendary. His singer in Poor Man's Riches introduced me to my wife. So basically, I wouldn't have a family without those guys. But the pranks, one night in particular, we were on this tour. Do you remember the band Staple?
I'm not familiar with those guys.
Okay. So we were on tour with a band called Staple and Poor Man's Riches. And the last night of the tour, I felt bad for anybody that bought a ticket to that show. Like, they all deserve to get their money back, every single one of them, because Poor Man's Riches pranked us every single song but one. And I mean, I bet we played an hour and 15 minutes. And so, I mean, every single song, they did something. They would come out, and like dance with wigs on, or like be firing water guns at our crotch, or hitting us with wet towels from side stage, or putting hot sauce on my water bottle or microphone that you had to be 18 years old and sign a waiver in case of injury that you'll not hold them liable. They did that to me, like while I'm performing, so I basically have a strong ambivalence towards pranking other bands now that Andrew's very familiar with. I'm like, it's one song and that's it. You do it for another one, somebody's getting hurt, like, so you come up here one song, that's all you get. You come up here again and something bad's going to happen to whoever walks up on that stage.
We've all been through those shows because it's like for some bands that's like their love language, It's like the older brother that picks on the younger brother or something. It's like, oh, it's just because you're my kid brother. It's like, I remember being on the last show of a tour, standing there and getting my feet duct taped together. Getting water, getting TP'd. So once you've been through that for a while, it's like, all right, here's the deal. Like, before this tour's over, everybody's gonna want to do this. And then if you just kind of set the ground rules, like you can do something nice for a song, then everybody gets to like, have their fun. But it's not like they know that we're not going to feel more loved by the more pranks, like we can't wait to do it back or something. We're not a big one-upping pranker group of guys.
No, not at all. The best prank I ever, do you remember the band Spoken, Mark?
I've heard of them before. I don't know if I listened to them much back in the day.
The best prank I ever saw was the lead singer of Spoken. They came out with rolling a vault or a case, a road case, a really large road case. They rolled it out on stage. They picked him up while he was singing and put him in the road case and shut it and wheeled him off stage. That was the best prank I ever saw. And I've seen a lot of them. I've seen a ton of them. So we were on tour with Skillet, and they poured from the top truss, poured flour over the drummer. They wet him down, poured water all over his head, and then poured flour on him and and ruined his drum set. Had to purchase him a brand new drum set because they ruined his drum set. So I mean, I've seen a ton of them.
That's hilarious.
Skillet, flour, it's just all ingredients and cooked with them.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, so I'm not a huge fan of pranks, but Ryan, of course, he's going to say that to you because he's the reason why I'm not a huge fan of pranks, because he just relentlessly pranked us one particular night over and over.
Well, there you go.
You saved me from having to go through the pain of so many pranks. So.
Yeah. Dude, when we were on tour with Families Force 5, which is a show that you saw, Mark, and to make the point of like, you come up once and that's it, that's fine, was we were on tour with Family Force 5. They came up and pranked us once. And our tour manager, our sound guy at the time, was a guy named Chad Sterling. They tried to come up and do it again. He came up with like a knife on stage. They tried to like tape my legs together like Andrew was talking about. He came up with a knife and just like sliced it immediately. As soon as they did it, he sliced it immediately, and he was pointed them to get off stage holding a knife in his hand. It was like, that's it. You got one, you're done, you know? And so that's kind of the way it goes now. Like, we'll let you have one, but you're not getting any more than that.
So these next questions are what we close with and ask everyone. So first question, what would you tell your 21-year-old self?
Relax.
That's hilarious. A hilarious question. I would say tell my 21-year-old self that 20 years from now, you're going to wake up and not be very much different. So you're going to still be in a body that hurts whenever you finish a show, and you're still going to love it, and you're still going to be playing video games, and you're still going to be singing and screaming and doing the exact same thing you were doing, you know, when you were 15.
He doesn't even look different.
So
No, he doesn't. How do you do this after 20 years of doing this? Your voice sounds exactly the same. How do you maintain that?
I don't know. I've had some scares, man. I've believe it or not, I played my first show in Disciple in 1990. So 4 years ago, or 34 years ago, excuse me. So I've been in the band for a really, really long time. And there were some scares, you know, where my voice I struggle with allergies, and, sometimes I'll sing through sickness or allergies or whatever, and it really damaged my voice. But I don't know, man. I think I just kind of tell my body this is what we're doing, and it just bucks up and says, okay, here we go. And just gets ready to go. I've been very blessed and fortunate on this last album. I felt really good and felt like I did a good job on all these songs. On other albums like Oh God Save Us All and Long Live the Rebels, I was struggling the whole time, wondering if I was ever going to get the track laid down because my voice was just in such bad shape. So I've just been fortunate, man. There's not any ritual or any magical thing I've been doing. I've just been fortunate, just very stubborn, just keep going.
All right, next question. What are you drinking lately? If you don't drink alcohol, it could be anything refreshing you like to drink.
Well, today it was 2 zero sugar grape monsters, ultraviolet monsters, and a cup of coffee. And I can honestly say that I feel as if I had no caffeine because I have such a high tolerance to caffeine that I don't feel like I'm like overly, bouncy in this interview or talking way too much, or I have all this energy, but yeah, just kind of helps me be normal.
What about you, Andrew?
I'm a big coffee drinker, so I love Pete's coffee. That's my thing. So I have 2 cups of Pete's coffee every day, just hot, black, make it in the AeroPress, straight up.
Even when it's 98 degrees outside and 100% humidity, it's going to drink hot coffee.
It's true.
Wow.
If it's inside with the air conditioning, it's like, might as well be winter.
And so, as you know, this is Rock Down South. So, what is something, or maybe a couple things that come to mind, that you love about the South?
Well, Andrew's not from here, so yeah, I'm sure he'll have a different answer than mine. But sports and football obviously are things that I love, absolutely love about the South. I love college football. I love NFL football a whole lot. Love going to high school football games. Love following football, talking about football. I mean, just absolutely love it. And what's really crazy is, a lot of musicians don't like sports at all, but the four of us
Yeah.
are insane about insane about sports. I think that's why we're best friends. We really get along very well. We'll watch baseball. Andrew was a big, huge hockey fan coming from California, San Jose area. And he was a, San Jose Sharks, but mostly a Philadelphia Flyers hockey fan. We all made fun of him when he first joined the band about how much he liked hockey. He was watching hockey, and he ended up just like saying screw you guys and just being himself. And we ended up loving hockey. And now we, love it nowhere near as much as he does, but we all love it a lot. And so he just basically added one more vice to, our repertoire of things that we wish we didn't do. And that's so we're watching baseball and football and hockey and basketball and I've even started watching soccer, which I try to get them involved in it, and they're coming around on it a little bit. But
Yeah, I'm coming around on the soccer thing for sure. And yeah, I'm a proud hockey disciple when I walk up on the bus and everyone's watching a game or playing the video game and I'm not even there. And that's kind of where we're at now. So
that is. We're all watching hockey, and it's all Andrew's fault. We didn't even think it was a sport before he showed up. So
But something you like about the South, Andrew, now that you've been in Nashville for 10 years?
Yeah, I'll say I think my favorite thing about the South is the people. Everyone jokes about Southern hospitality and stuff, but it's true. There's a lot more outgoing and friendly and caring people in the South per capita. I don't think people are necessarily trash if they're from the East Coast or the West Coast or up north, you betcha, or anything like that. But I think just typically people from like, the East Coast, they're in a rush, or people are annoying them at all times. And so there's kind of a stereotype that goes with that. It doesn't apply to everybody, but you know what I'm talking about. People are just in a hurry, kind of in their own lane. In the South, people are a lot more willing to, be relaxed, hang out, have a conversation about something.
Andrew just found his kindred spirits here in the South because he is a super nice, sweet human being and would help anybody and love anybody. And so he just found a whole bunch of people that are just like, yeah, that's why he likes it so much.
Hey, well, thank you so much, Kevin and Andrew, for being a part of the show today. I know we went way over time, but I absolutely love this conversation. Where can people find and connect with you guys online?
DiscipleRocks.com has our link tree. It'll take you to our online store, tour dates, Patreon, our Rebel Society Patreon group. What else, Kevin?
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's all there on the link tree, I do believe.
Yeah.
So whatever your social media of choice is, I think we can accommodate you, unless you're still using MySpace. We've given up there. But we do have a great time capsule of MySpace if you want to go check that out. It should be a lot of interesting content there. Yeah, man, I think you nailed it all right there. DiscipleRocks.com has it.
Thank you so much for listening to the show today. We hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I had an absolute blast talking with Kevin and Andrew. This band has been one of my favorites to listen to since high school, and these guys were really fun to talk with. And I think our conversation got into some really interesting territory that long-term fans might appreciate. So make sure to go follow Disciple, Kevin, and Andrew on all of their social media pages and give their latest album, Skeleton Psalms, a listen. It's an absolute banger. You can find all our content at rockdownsouth.com, and go make sure to go follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for the latest updates. Leave us a 5-star review if you can. We would really appreciate it. And as always, the views and opinions expressed by our guests are theirs and don't necessarily reflect our own. I'm Mark, and you've been listening to Rock Down South. See y'all next time.